Hello, I'm back to touch up a little bit more on equivalency. And I mentioned in the previous video on equivalency that you could set up something using uh, an equivalence process. You can set up something that shows that something in another neighborhood could be swapped with the monode that it's equivalent to. So, as you can see here, you built this neighborhood here. And then this is that essential. I probably should label that to show that those are two different neighborhoods. So this is outside. Here's the neighborhood. This is it's activated. These are all IEMs um, and to refresh anyone's memory on this, it would be infinitely extensible monodes. So essentially, the adicity is infinite. You can add, take away. It doesn't affect anything. So almost always with an IEM, and maybe I could say always, but we'll just say almost always that there's always going to be an equivalence with between monodes. Maybe there's something that could bring out an exception to that, but that's neither here nor there. Um, so this is kind of an illustration of what a standard equivalence between those two different kinds of structures. Um, and I don't know, maybe you would call it something like an assertion of equivalence because you're asserting that these two are equivalent with actually going through the process of creating it, right? Because using this up here and we swapped, we're just showing that this structure right here is equivalent to that structure right there, based off of the ability to swap monodes that are equivalent, and that's kind of some of the, I guess, power, if you will, of using equivalence in this way within monodic theory. So I just kind of wanted to demonstrate that before I went on to the next idea that I was working on, and I don't really have a name for it in that, but it dawned on me, and a lot of this is kind of speculative. It's just kind of like looking at things and kind of comparing, contrasting, and trying to see what seems valid and what doesn't. A lot of like, I guess you could kind of say like kind of an art to it. Like you're just kind of, it's not being systematized. You know, it's not becoming. It's not a well formed statement or anything like that. It's just these ideas are coming together and just kind of seeing how they fit together. And it's really interesting. So I realized in a kind of an aha moment that you could turn a operator or process. I've been using the term synonymously, and you'll see why. But you can use it as a monode by we'll start with the alpha. Um, so you give it the index, give it its own entity, and so essentially, if an operation has an index, then that means it's a different operator. And I thought, well, what if an operation or process has an index, then it's actually a monode rather than a process. Well, then if that was the case, you had to think of a way to be able uh, to start that process, like a catalyst, if you will. And my inspiration for that came from um, the Lisp programming language, where it used a evaluation function to be able to evaluate all the subsequent functions and actually get have them quote unquote run, essentially to be able to do something. And so, in the same sense, I was like, okay, so you could say that you put like another alpha in front of that, but then that might defeat the purpose of this. You know, maybe alpha expands that, but that stays a monode. You know, but what if you want this to actually take an action? Well, then I got to thinking, well, if we take a little a symbol from process calculi, I think is what it's called, process calculus, something like that. If you take that and apply it before that, so you kind of get like that. And then, boom, this operates on this, and that makes this operation work on, well, now we got a problem. What's it going to operate on? Well, if there's nothing there, if it's not stated explicitly, then the implicit idea would be that it'd be the moving universe itself, right? So if that's the case, anytime you see these operations that are kind of like monodes become part of a process, and there's nothing to operate on, well, it's got to operate on something. Well, the only thing it can operate on implicitly would be the mu universe, which is indicated of that symbol. So if we do that, then this activates that, or engages that, or whatever terminology. I haven't figured it out. So then this becomes kind of more of a way to the operation on this. So this allows this, like a catalyst, allows this to operate on this. So you kind of get this idea, which the A here doesn't mean really much anymore after that happens. I don't know what significance that would have, but and then as we know, when we use alpha on the mu, well, we get this. I'll use I. And that's the whole idea. And then just, with many other kinds of systems, there's a way to incorporate meta syntax into the syntax. Well, if we give your process operation an index, then we can make it not be able to process the subsequent symbol until it's got something in behind it. So it'd have to have its own little... And you kind of get the gist. Now, like I said, this is a lot of speculation and a lot of just kind of interesting play on these ideas and that. And needs much more work, but I like the whole idea that you can incorporate meta level processing within a simple process, which any system that's going to explain the broader scopes of mathematics and logic would have to have some sort of syntax that could be encapsulated and encoded. At least I believe that's the case. So that's kind of the idea behind this. But I don't really have a name for it yet. I'm still trying to think, because it's a mono, but it's still a process. It could be like maybe an inert process or inert operation or whatever. I haven't really, like I said, I haven't really determined. And then you don't even need this if you don't want it. You could think of it as either an IEM with infinite adicity, or you could think of it as, you could say as well, it's got a 0. Because when a process works on another process, the adicity doesn't really matter. It could be later on be built into a higher level and make a lot more sense there, but it's nothing, and not even close to that way as we speak. So that's kind of idea. I do like the idea of inert process or inert operations. I might use that term later on as I talk more about it. I just kind of wanted to get that out there. And if you guys want, you can let me know what you think. If not, continue watching the videos. Appreciate it. Thank you.